Good evening, I'm John Wertheim. Welcome to 60 Minutes Presents. Tonight, stories that inspire. We'll meet Ukrainian dancers pursuing their art while in exile, and a teenage skier who flies downhill without the aid of eyesight. But we begin with a tale of certified heroes. In 1904, 180 Americans were trapped by fire in a Pennsylvania coal mine. Two heroes went in to save them, but the rescuers and all but one of the miners perished. Still, that act of heroism touched one of the richest Americans, a man whose steel mills were fired by coal. Andrew Carnegie donated more than $100 million in today's money to recognize heroes in the U.S. and Canada. As Scott Pelley first reported in 2021, a good deal has changed in 118 years. Thousands have been awarded the Carnegie Hero Medal, and advances in neuroscience are revealing why some of us may be heroic. We'll get to the science, but first meet some of the Carnegie heroes, including Terry Ann Thomas.
The story will continue in a moment.
I remember thinking just almost instantly, I am not going to let somebody die.
Terry Ann Thomas was a civilian overseeing confiscated property at the headquarters of the Topeka Police Department. In 2015, an agitated man came into the basement property room to demand his bicycle. Thomas turned to find it.
As soon as I turned around and started to walk off, I heard a scream.
The scream came from Officer Tammy Walter. For reasons we don't know, she'd been attacked by the man in the property room waiting area. Thomas hit a panic alarm and charged out of her locked room.
And so as I ran out there, I saw there was blood on the wall, and she was down. And she was not moving. And I went over there and I pulled him off of her. He looked at me and he punched me in the face. He turned around and he started back on her. He's kicking her while she's on the ground and constantly punching her. So I went and grabbed him again. And I pulled him off.
Help was slow in coming. It seems no one had triggered the panic alarm before, so the cops upstairs weren't sure what it meant.
He grabbed something off her gun belt. And I thought, okay, he has her gun. This whole thing has just changed. He hit the elevator button, and he looked at me, and he said, "You're coming with me."
Later, it turned out it was the officer's radio the man had, not her gun. But Thomas didn't know that in the fight.
What happened then?
And so I put my foot in the door. It opened up. And with everything I had, I grabbed him and I pulled him out of the elevator. And just as soon as we got out, I ran to the door. I opened it and I just started screaming. And that's when all the officers came in and took him down.
A Topeka cop reported that story to the Pittsburgh headquarters of the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission. Eric Zarin is president of the commission. He's a former Secret Service agent.
Well, we look at up to 1,000 cases a year, and we award about just a little over 10% of that. So in recent years, that equates to about 80 cases a year.
How do you define hero?
And we define it as, at least in terms of our medal awarding requirement, is a man or a woman that willingly and knowingly risked their life to an extraordinary degree to save or attempt to save the life of another human being.
What are some of the things that your investigators go through when they're investigating a case?
We write to or contact police departments, fire departments, the victim in the case who was the rescued party, and other eyewitnesses to the act. And we start to build an understanding of each case.
And this is the medal.
The Carnegie Medal, molded in bronze, comes with $5,500 and other financial support.
We also pay for funeral costs fully for a hero that is killed in the act. We pay any medical costs for any injury that they incur, to include psychological after effects, PTSD. We don't present a medal and walk away. We stay there. We stay there for the hero's lifetime and sometimes, far beyond. I mean, we were recently looking at a case that, a gentleman was killed in his heroic act, and we supported his wife and then one of his daughters for a total of 72 years until his daughter died.
On the beach on that day, I just reacted.
Pete Ponser fit the Carnegie definition of hero. He was on a North Carolina beach in 2015 when someone pointed to a boy swept away by a rip current. Ponser and another man swam about 150 yards.
And we found a young teenager, a 13-year-old boy, and water was starting to wash over his face.
This is the boy after they swam him back to shore.
As we get to the beach, a church youth group leader comes out and meets with us. He says, "Thank you. There's another one."
A second boy was drowning. Ponser ran, broke his foot, ignored it, and swam out. He eventually lost sight of the boy, but the child was pulled from the water by others and flown to a hospital.
So why you?
I didn't think about it. It's kind of like if you put your hand on a hot stove and pull it back right away without thinking. That's kind of what it was like for me. It just needed to be done, and I did it.
It was the same reaction for David McCartney when fate arrived on a 2-lane road in Indiana.
I was heading south, and there was a vehicle that seemed like it was going a little bit left, a little bit right, and then all of a sudden it went right, and it hit a culvert.
What happened next?
Well, you could start seeing the smoke. It was starting to bellow out, and you could actually start hearing Miss Testerman, who I come to find out was starting to scream because the vehicle was actually starting to catch on fire.
Elizabeth Testerman was trapped.
Yeah, she's sitting there screaming. Underneath the dash is on fire. The smoke's just going through your nose, and you're trying to figure out, well, what to do now.
McCartney and another man kicked in her windshield and cut her seatbelt with a knife.
We pull her feet out, and then we kind of wiggle her up through that windshield that was kicked out, and then we pull her over to the grass and laid her down.
A minute later, he told us, the car exploded. That fear of dying in a car is well known to Abigail Marsh. She's not a hero, but she was saved by one. At age 19, she was on an interstate at night and swerved to miss a dog. She went into a spin, which left her facing lanes of high-speed traffic in a car she couldn't restart.
And I spent some amount of time 100% certain I was about to die. I mean, I was, any one of these cars hadn't swerved in time, and I definitely would have been dead.
What happened?
I hear a rap on the passenger side window, and I see a man's face staring into my car. And he said, "You look like you could use some help."
The stranger got her car started and drove her to safety. His act of heroism led her to become Dr. Abigail Marsh, a neuroscientist who studies what gets into the heads of heroes. At Georgetown University, she has published studies on the brains of two kinds of people: psychopaths who have no compassion for others, and people who have so much compassion that they donated a kidney to a stranger. She found a striking difference in a pair of tiny structures near the bottom of the brain called the amygdalae. They subconsciously recognize danger and react faster than conscious thought.
One of the big things that we know they do is they're responsible for generating the experience of fear. What's interesting about that is that not only is the amygdala essential for giving you the experience of fear, it seems to allow you to empathize with other people's fear.
As her subjects were scanned, Marsh showed them emotional faces.
And whereas people who are psychopathic show very minimal responses in the amygdala when they see a frightened face, people who have given kidneys to strangers have an exaggerated response in the amygdala, which we think means that they are more sensitive than most people to others' distress, better at interpreting when other people are in distress, more likely to pick up on it.
Perhaps like the man who saved her on the freeway.
No telling how many psychopaths drove past you that night.
Just try to relax and stay as still as possible during the scan.
We wondered whether our Carnegie heroes were born heroic.
All right, you comfortable and ready?
Was there a difference in their brains? All three volunteered for Dr. Marsh's scans.
I'm not going to lie, I was really pleased and gratified by what we found in the heroic rescuers, which is that just like the altruistic kidney donors, their amygdalas were larger than average and significantly more responsive to the sight of somebody else in distress. which makes so much sense. I mean, these are the people who, when they saw somebody terrified because they thought they were about to die, they didn't just sit there.
They have all told us that they sprang into action, as you say, without thinking.
You don't think, you're strictly acting.
I didn't think about it.
I didn't even think about it.
It really makes sense when you think about how ancient and deep in our brains structures like the amygdala are. And I wouldn't want to say that the amygdala is where altruism is in the brain. It's one link in a very long chain of events that's happening that takes us from seeing that somebody's in danger to actually acting to help them. But we know that it's definitely an essential link in that chain, whether you're a mouse or a rat or a dog or a human. It's performing these same functions at a really deep, fast, subconscious level.
If the act of heroism is a sprint, the consequences are a marathon. For David McCartney, it was for the better. He's the first to admit he wasn't a good man. In the past, he'd pleaded guilty to battery. But he promised the woman he pulled from the burning car that he would do good. And in 2019, he donated a kidney. Who did the kidney go to?
I have no clue.
On the other hand, for Terry Ann Thomas, heroism has been troubling. She wasn't able to go back to work in the police property room.
I had a hard time. I still have a hard time.
And it's been a hard time for Pete Ponser, who was left with regret. That second boy he could not reach was flown to a hospital, but did not survive.
A hero would have gotten the second one as well. And that's a challenge that I always live with. I just couldn't get the second kid.
His regret was coupled with curiosity about the boy he saved 7 years ago, the boy whose name he never knew. The young man that you saved is named Sebastian Prokop. And we found him.
Okay.
And he had something that he wanted to say to you. So let me introduce you.
I'm Sebastian Prokop. I'm 18. I recently graduated from high school and I'm working towards going to college, getting a car, all that good stuff. Thank you to the one who pulled me out and let me be able to achieve all the milestones that I've got and that I plan to get.
Thank you, Scott.
What is it like to see him today?
It kind of takes my breath away, Scott, because that helps to bring some closure and some help.
Help for Heroes has been the mission of the Carnegie Fund for 118 years. It has bestowed 10,000 medals and awarded $40 million. Back in 1904, Andrew Carnegie sensed what science has now confirmed. Heroes, he said, cannot be created. They act on an impulse, a mysterious gift to the few.
The psychological cost for some heroes.
It's okay to say, look, I really should talk to someone.
At 60minutesovertime.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.